I think we're back on the internet. We'll know soon. Hooray beer?
Hooray!
Is that what we do? I don't know. All right, thank goodness.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think we're back.
Maybe I'll...
yeah, good news.
It's not my favorite.
That would...
So, yeah. I'm just going to retweet you, and let's hope that this works. Yeah, just keep it coming. We are. Cool. So we were bantering about, well, I don't know, all sorts of disasters and things, but the lack of of activity, local, regional, international, or other.
I think we're back.
The answer is yes to that, Emily.
All right.
That's really the question that I wanted to see. I'm gonna throw myself out the window at some point before the end of this show. Hopefully that resolves itself. We'll give it a little bit. Let us know if we don't show back up. I seem to be going somewhere between green, orange, I haven't seen that color before, and red as far as the warnings go. So we'll give this a ride for a little bit, and if it doesn't work, we will come up with an alternate solution. And
chalk it up.
Yeah, I think the other thing we had thrown around was we could always record and then upload, and then if we actually go in and watch it all at the same time, we could make obnoxious comments about ourselves, which is, another way to
a very Mystery Science Theater 3000
another
way to go
approach the SonarFeed. So so I that's what we were talking about was Olympics, but obviously EPL or Champions League, so UEFA stuff. There's really no dates in mind as far as the last 48 hours go. The Olympics, I haven't looked in the last hour or so. The last I had seen was
2021 was the last I heard.
As of that point. But I didn't see like an official Olympics has declared X. I think it was really IOC people still babbling about it. So at this...
Well, I think they were initially trying to hold out with like a 4-week deadline by which they were going to make a decision, which was just transparently ridiculous. And with them just basically hoping that the virus goes away in the next couple of weeks and they could just hold it as scheduled. But they obviously at this point decided that, that's not going to happen. And so now we have the postponement. What else were we missing? No U.S. Open Cup, no Champions League, no MLS.
Well,
that's a little bit too pessimistic at this point.
I mean, that's actually the one space where they actually have the advantage of having the season run at a different time frame is they're able to push it out, and frankly having shortened it as the way they did for last year is going to work to their advantage. And it's so funny, I've actually seen people who are like, oh, then they'll be playing in mid-December, and I'm like, did
like they did every year up until 2018?
Or did you go to Toronto in December and freeze yourself to death? Because I did 2 times. So it's going to be okay if December 12th or whatever they're playing MLS Cup. It'll be fine. And as much as I hate the concept of something like neutral site, if it allows them to play like a full season or get really, really close at least, I think that's going to be great. I think the concern now is just frankly to dive into the crazy that is the USA right now. It is, quote, good. We want to be open for business sooner, but like half the country has yet to have like significant, city impact that we're seeing here in Seattle, and we're starting to see very much seeing in New York State and city and elsewhere. I think we're going to start to hit other areas where places are going to be like, we're shutting down for another month, and that's going to be April. They're going to say that. So now all of a sudden it's May. I think speculation at this point is just silly.
Yeah. Well, bringing it back to the soccer for a minute, MLS has their, I think were we on the air when they announced the 30-day, suspension? I think we might have been until May 10th. Or no, they were going to go by the CDC guidelines. So I don't think we were broadcasting when they made that announcement. because it was initially a 30-day suspension of the league, and then they bumped it back to May 10th. And they on Friday basically said that they extended the no training moratorium, and they're basically doing that week by week, which seems a bit silly, but I think they just want to maintain as much flexibility as possible in the event that they get guidance that things are going to get better rapidly, which again seems insane from just looking at where things are right now. But I guess just taking, for the sake of argument, if they develop a vaccine next week and the curve gets
Sure.
flattened and cover training until 20, they're able to March 20. It's March like 4 week
Yeah.
moratorium on training, but again, that's highly unrealistic that they're going to be that they just keep it's why they're extensions of the moratorium, and I'm sure this weekend
Yeah.
or on Friday, and again with this uh, within the Sounders for the next 2 weeks. So either MLS is going to have starting to train this, or the Sounders are going to have a spring training not Arizona.
Hey, if it was the NFL,
It's
they
just
would have themselves declared essential employees, and they would have 2-a-days, and it would be fine.
the NFL, man, did
Right?
they get lucky as much as anybody can get lucky being completely out of season and not particularly close to being back June or late June, I think. They have the mini camps that they're going to miss out on, but again, like week-long sessions. Just so the real training camps again won't get underway until early summer, so they have plenty of time to see how things shake out before they have to make any real moves. But they're still sacrificing some stuff. The draft in Vegas is canceled, or at least the way it usually
Vegas is
is with the
generally
massive
canceled right
crowds.
now, so
Yeah, yes, that is true. My brother lives down there, and he was driving into on the strip today, and it was just completely empty. It was like a scene out of a apocalyptic movie. It was video just driving around, no one on the street. He works downtown or works on the strip, so I think he was going in to get some stuff. But yeah, pretty crazy.
it's a little nuts. We don't need to do it now, but we can talk a little later about the fact that Tom Brady is now Florida man, because I think that that's amusing, and given the situation in society these days, something that I plan on making fun of, maybe more than I did of him being, the Patriots quarterback. So we could dig into that. So maybe let's talk about fun stuff. So Saturday night, which feels so long ago right now.
Yeah,
So what,
right.
roughly 49 hours ago. Joe TV, SoundersFC.com, and the Sounders app all streamed. Unfortunately, just for the state of Washington, the last year's MLS Cup final, which was pretty cool. There were a lot of folks live tweeting about it. What's fun stuff? There's some fun stuff. Come on, Emily. Um, there's probably some significant lag between us talking and people hearing it. But it was
Go with the
that
flow
was
at this
one of the
point.
more positive things that I think I felt in quite some time. Partially because of a little of the
Yeah,
camaraderie
it was really
stuff.
cool.
There was a lot of just general chatter. Twitter was fun. Again, we shipped the same match preview for ECS that we did last year. That was pretty cool. It actually got more opens than some other match previews in recent times, which is great. And I think that's just there's excitement for soccer, and people were Yeah, it's like, oh,
for
is
any
that a
content
tweet of
whatsoever.
a photo that I already saw this morning? Cool, I will like it again. Um, yeah, people were pretty desperate, but at
Yeah.
the same time, it was really interesting to and I know you were in the space, but there were a number of us in a Discord chat, and we were on Twitter. It was neat to see the game with a bunch of people who had watched the game together, but none of whom were actually like online throughout that entire period of time. So like the types of reactions were very very different, and frankly, there was stuff from like the first half. Kind of if you read the newspaper the next day, your impression was very, very different after you actually sat down and watched the game and like focused. So there was
Yes.
some
Yeah.
quality Taylor Twellman hate on the internet. I did. He did. He
He
responded at
posted it,
least
didn't
to
he?
Sean
I
Wheeler
thought
and
I
I
saw
think
him
one or two other
respond.
people that I saw, which basically makes it all worthwhile at the end of the day. So it was fun.
Yeah.
Anything jump out at you that was just different than either you remember it or kind of the spur of the moment?
Uh, I mean, obviously, the huge talking point was that Toronto outplayed the Sounders in the first half, and I didn't really think that was true, except for maybe the last minute and a half, which is probably what led them to halftime being short. Really, and then
Yeah.
uh, I think yeah, that's said after the as they were in the second half, but I think the goal they were obviously clearly the own goal. Just the excitement of the game, but fun to do it in that kind of way. So I'm glad that they're
Yeah.
doing this more times, and maybe more after that if depending on how things work out. But my main complaint is the selection of the games that they're broadcasting. I mean, the LA Supporter Shield one is a great one. Though is a great one. That one, and then they're doing the LA game, which you know was arguably
Which I mean,
the best game they've ever played.
yeah.
I really
I would say
picked that
the four
wrestling
four
game with
game.
like the 4
Like
game.
I don't think
That's
I've
just
actually watched it on TV. Yeah, I don't know if I've actually gone back and watched it like straight through.
really. Oh,
I'm sure
it's
I've watched like
incredible,
segments of it
incredible.
here and there, but I don't think I've actually gone back and really sat through it. Uh, which
It's a
Well, it's also
such a
one of
good
those
game.
things where I
I've watched
think
the
the
highlights like
experience that I
probably
had
a couple
being
of
at the
dozen
game, like you
times
almost like
over
want to
the
hold on to that. Uh, but yeah, it is a little
yeah.
random. That said, I'm not going to complain
Mm.
about it at this time. And frankly, Mickey, you might get your wish. You might start to see other
Sure.
matches if we start to have more and more stuff on
Yes.
Saturday nights, because it would be one thing if it
Yes.
was just Sounders that weren't playing and like
More
other
delay.
stuff started
Yes.
to show up that you know Joe TV or whomever could put on the air on the weekends. I expect that we're going to see a lot of this, and if you noticed, I guess over the weekend, a lot of other MLS teams were doing this. Dynamo had played. Was it
Yeah.
2006? Was it MLS Cup final? Uh, versus
Yeah. The MLS
versus
Cup.
New England.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of other things I saw, and I, just kind of passing through Twitter a little bit over the weekend. So it seemed like there was a bit of buzz about that. There was actually, was it the U.S. Women's National Team versus England was on over the weekend. The Snow Classico, as they're calling it, was on yesterday, and
No
that was actually
Classico.
fun because it was long enough ago that you're like, oh, I totally forgot that happened, and I'm like, why is Brad Guzan in the net? And so on. Like there were just a couple of interesting things. Even like just Herc Gomez and like his presence and like where he was as a part of that particular squad was pretty interesting to see. And it's just stuff you kind of forget about. And it's like the Dempsey things
Yeah.
I remember. But even like just the presence of, I guess, a couple of players, like their physical presence on the field and like the way they were part of the action was really, really different. And no, that was pretty cool. So it's nice to have a little bit of a throwback weekend, see some stuff that you may remember totally, and then other things that you're like, wow, I totally don't remember that happening at all.
Yeah, I'll be curious. I don't know if we'll ever
Yeah,
find out, but I'd just be interested to see what the TV ratings were like for that game relative to what the usually get. They usually are live. Even a couple of Nielsen families can make that difference. But local for their away matches, their home matches are a little worse. Like I said, I'm just curious. I'm interested to see what if those ratings come out, just to see how those do, because people are starved for sport content,
for
and with
sure.
with the lockdowns now in place, there's going to be a lot of TV to watch. So even though they're going to be reruns, there you know a lot of fond memories of some of these games, and so it'll be a cool
Super
situation
fun.
on Twitter, kind of live, chatting along with the game. Yeah, so I could see that really becoming popular.
Frankly, in
There's not
general
much else going
now,
on.
just having a bunch of former players together, just screwing around on Twitter or whatever, chatting with one another is pretty interesting, especially if you get the right ones. Not that we're going to get, obviously, current players at that point, but there is that opportunity for like an injured
Yeah.
player who's rehabbing and not necessarily with the team, or like recently retired players. But, I think this is where, again, we're just in a different place in Seattle, and having someone like Brad Evans be part of the fold kind of formally again. And again, he's been in and out of Seattle stuff since he's, retired, but, not necessarily doing stuff for the Sounders as his day job. But having him do things like this, aside from just coming up with fire tweets on the regular, um, I'm here for this. That and like if Stefan Fry wants to come up with workouts for all of us, I mean we could go with that too. Um,
I
it's
don't know if
a
I want to
little
deal with
a
those
little
workouts.
a
That seems
little
like a good way
harsh.
to injure yourself.
Speaking of injuring yourself, how many tequilas did you have?
I actually only had like 4, but that's a lot for me these days. And then I had a couple of San Juan seltzers, so I was a little. And this is in which I'm going to have later.
Nice.
If this is some quality stuff, this is the good stuff. So I'll
You're
have one
like,
of those later, and
bedtime.
I'm sure that'll put me right back to sleep.
Uh, it was funny. There were a couple
Yeah,
things for me that
back to
popped
sleep, babe.
from the game. So one, I had not heard the line from TV where they talked about Quentin Westberg, the keeper for Toronto, being a Bryce Harper lookalike. Like I just totally missed that, and now I cannot unsee it now, and it like he legit looks like Bryce Harper. which is kind of funny. So, if for those of you not familiar, and if you're not familiar with Bryce Harper, I don't know
I
what
I,
to say.
I don't
Not that
see
you have
that.
to like him or not, but he's just like that obnoxious that you probably have seen him somewhere. Phillies slugger, former Washington Nationals slugger, former college baseball monster, who has some cool hair, is what I'll say, and we'll just leave it at that. That was interesting. I think some of the other stuff was there was a run that I can't remember who brought the ball up the right side, got to the area to kind of the corner of the 18, and Morris was making a left side run, and they must have just not seen him at all. And I don't remember that one bit from the game. Like, it's one of those things where, like, you remember the action, but you didn't necessarily realize how open a player or two were. And you actually saw it on the TV, like he was visibly frustrated by not having, the ball come his way. And then that and just like Victor just looked dominant. And he looked dominant in the stadium. And he was, again, coming at the south end of the stadium. So you paid attention to it there. But when you get the close ups on him on the screen on TV, he just looked like he was in a whole nother place from the folks trying to defend against him. So, again, nothing too shocking there, given the recognition he got coming out of that game. But it was interesting to see, some defensive matchups, and there was some stuff that I had not really noticed on the defensive side, which I felt like we had this year in kind of that preseason and then early on in the season, that Sounders bringing the ball out of the back has just been ugly in a lot of situations, and we've talked about it a couple times. It was bad in this match, too. And there were a few points where it wasn't like, back passes to the keeper, but just they made some decisions sort of turning around and were like overmatched by the forwards or attackers that were coming at them, or 2-3 players were attacking them. They were like, oh, I'll just turn around and jog back with the ball, and ended up losing the ball or almost losing the ball a couple of times. And it does seem to have carried over into the season. So I'm curious to see, especially now with some break time and some like strategy, because I'm sure they're talking to one another or watching film or doing something, in their downtime. It
Yeah, an app that they use called Huddle, which basically allows type deal going on as well. So, but yeah,
I just think it'll be interesting to see what advantages come out of something like this. And what's curious is, obviously, given that there's contracts and people have so many weeks that they're essentially paid to work for Sounders, like, are they on vacation now? Do they get paid a different amount? Like, how does this work?
they're set, their wages based on their contracts. So I don't expect that to change. Maybe there's like some kind of force majeure clause which allows the Sounders to cut salaries for staff. Are you talking about players or like support
I would say
staff?
players specifically. Yeah.
Player. Okay, so though that's covered by the CBA, obviously, which is a problem because the CBA has not been ratified yet. And go for it. And sure, kind of where things this specifically ask the Players Association,
Right.
what kind of are there for this kind of situation? Because this is
World Wars, yeah. Like,
in certain history of us, and maybe ever in sports, short. And okay, so I can say at this 75 years, like, is there a point where they don't get paid because they're not in season at the moment? My understanding when I asked them, and I got an answer basically saying that there's no issues at this point, but that was like 2 weeks ago. And so that was like maybe right at the start of the suspension of the season. So, at some point you have to figure that MLS and the owners are going to be like, hey, we don't have a season here. Why are we paying you guys to do nothing? So it's just tough, again, because there's no CBA in place, we don't know what the provisions are for that kind of thing. Again, I should let me rephrase it. There's a CBA in place, but it's not been fleshed out and finalized. There's like a term sheet or a memorandum of understanding, which is basically bullet points of what the deal is supposed to look like. So it's probably like 10 or 12 pages, whereas the CBA is like 80 to 150 pages. So we don't know, maybe they'll add this to the CBA, and for natural disasters and pandemic things. But yeah, it's a good question. I do not know the answer. At some point, if the season does not continue, you've got to think that MLS is going to try to get out from under those contracts or extend the contracts for an additional year or something like that. I saw a report that was it the NBA or that is wanting to cut salaries?
Well, I don't know if I saw that.
Right now, I thought I saw a report to that effect. I don't want to. Because again, there is no season going on right now, and the NBA was farther along than most. I mean, there's only a couple of professional leagues in season right now, including the NHL. So I don't know. It's it's going to cause a major fight if they try to get out from paying salaries. Right now, they are paying them. There's no indication that they're not. So my guess is that if May 10th rolls around and it looks like they're going to have to push back the season resuming until June or July, then you're going to start to see some nasty words, because at that point, that point the season itself becomes I think,
and that's where again, like if we have some visibility into like, oh, we'll be able to start by X. And I think there's a difference between Sounders are allowed to bring players into training by date X and Sounders can go play in Nashville, because the timing when Nashville may or may not have a significant impact with the virus going around, we have no read on. And you're looking at that for all of the teams in MLS and trying to do that math, and they're not going to start the season for half the teams. Like it's got to be like every place is safe to travel to.
They can't.
Traveling is safe. Airlines exist. Hotels are functioning. Like there's a million factors that go in. Oh wow.
My bartender is
since
hi, Jerry.
Your bartender.
Yes, I appreciate it. Say hello. Yes. He's bringing me drinks, so I appreciate it.
I'm gonna go drink my vodka now.
All right, enjoy.
There's a lot of factors that go. I just think that it's not quite as simple as like, well, everything's passed in Seattle and we're all allowed to go outside and play. Yeah.
No.
So
it's not how this virus is
I
working.
Just think there's so many things in play.
It's going to be everyone. Yeah, it's going to be everyone or no one, because MLS again is a single entity league, and I cannot conceive of a scenario where some teams are playing and some teams are not. There's no way that is going to happen. Maybe they stagger the starts, but again, I guess to some degree this depends on what the feds do, and they've obviously been reluctant to act on a national scale, and they've good luck with that, especially in a sporting context. Good luck.
Let's have that conversation, because we touched on it last show, but since then, so we're what, 2 weeks and a couple of days out from the last home match at Sounders. Since that time, there have been a number of people related to Sounders that have either tested positive, or have shown significant symptoms and are suspected to be positive with COVID-19. I haven't heard a ton of other things. I know a lot of people have their heads down and may or may not ever share. And frankly, again, there were 30,000 people in and around the stadium, not even counting, the support staff, the stadium staff, etc. And there's just lag on a lot of those different things. So you may not ever really get that information right away. And especially when we're hearing that there are tons of people who are asymptomatic that never really come down with it.
Yeah, you never know the symptoms.
But there are a couple of supporters that I know. One specifically that had tested positive, another whose parent had tested positive, and then there's somebody that's involved in kind of the media space, very close to you, adjacent to us, that they and their significant other are believed to be positive, but it's TBD because the tests were unavailable for them to have gone through it. So
yeah, yes, I saw that.
I don't say my fear is, but honestly, my fear is that there was a week after that match that everybody was still kind of mixing and mingling and doing their stuff, and then it wasn't until the following Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Was that really only a week ago? So a week ago yesterday, right? That everything closed. So restaurants, excuse me, in King County, I think it was a week ago yesterday. So there was a 8-day period after that last home match that everybody just kind of did their thing, while there was a vague please don't go do all these things out there. There was nothing legally stopping anyone from doing it. So we're still kind of in the window of people were out and around and doing things, and frankly, people were out and around doing things on Alki and up on every hiking thing ever.
Hiking trail,
Cal Anderson Park had twice had the police apparently show up and tell everybody to dissipate. And again, not that I haven't gone outside or gone to the grocery or whatever, but I spent more time, I think, in my apartment in the last 2 weeks in consecutive hour windows than I probably have in 6 months. So it's really hard to do, and I totally get it. But my concern is there's a lot of people that we all know who've been around a lot of people, in recent days and weeks, and I'm really concerned about what's happened towards the end of a lot of the sporting leagues. Now, thankfully, they kind of cascaded. The NBA stuff happened, and really quickly, Major League Baseball and the NHL and other leagues just started to lop off and be oh, we're not doing this, we're not doing this, we're not doing this. But we still saw players in a bunch of leagues, and in baseball, I think it was a number of minor league players. There were some suspected players in MLB. There's at least one NHL player. There are a series of them from the NBA, and then there were some other, minor leagues, and other teams in other places, whether it's college sports or otherwise, that there are suspected cases. So I just can't help but think that there's a lot more out there that we don't know, and that's the part that I think is hanging over all of us as everybody goes, "Hey, we're all healthy. Let's go outside and start training again."
Yeah, that's that again. It is wishful thinking, in my opinion, that MLS, and that's the league. Well, I'm familiar with, is going to be back by May 10th. Maybe it happens, but I just don't see a realistic scenario where that occurs because of the things you mentioned about this virus hasn't blanketed the entire United States, and the curve has been flattened, and now things are starting to get back to normal in some places as effectively, and some places it certainly hasn't reached the top of the crest where you're getting lots of infections. And so how are you going to bring a bunch of players back out there to train, let alone play games? And again, when I was talking to Carlisle, he mentioned that his understanding from talking to sources in front offices is they are not going to have player. Let's assume that the training moratorium is lifted this week. Let's assume that Inslee didn't have the stay-at-home order in place, and MLS decided that, all right, we're going to try to be back on May 10th, and so we're bringing back everybody to train this week. My understanding is that they're not going to, and from what he said, Carlisle said, they're basically not going to have players coming back as a team. It's going to be individual sessions with players. So not even getting all the center backs together to train and try to ramp back up. It's individual player sessions is where they're going to start. So you're going to have to go through individual player sessions, and then maybe you do group sessions with small-sided players or small-sided teams. Maybe you group, like I said, the center backs and the midfielders together, and you get them kind of working separately. And then you potentially have to ramp that down to make sure that there's no symptoms that come into play. So there's not, a relapse, so to speak. So then you've got to do all of that, and then you've got to get them together as a team, because you can't just have them coming in cold without having worked together on tactics and formations and such. And then you've got to likely have some type of scrimmages to get them into at least something. Some rounds just to make that no one tests positive. So just we're today about just like scenario that they're going to be back by May 10th. And I understand why the date something to kind of look at as a date to kind of work at, because again, in the of a date that's going to get all our games in starting now at this endpoint, especially if they're going to further extend the moratorium now, if that happens this week. Because again, the Sounders are not going to be training in the state of Washington on the 27th when the moratorium ends. It's not going to happen. So either they're going out of state, or MLS is going to allow some teams to train and some teams not, or they're going to extend the moratorium.
I mean,
which one
MLS,
do you think is more likely?
I don't know. No idea at all. So we dug in a little bit on this, and again, I'm glad to hear that most that are us adjacent or friends of the show, people we've met, seem to be in good health, which was a big fear for me for a while, especially knowing a lot of folks, whether it was ECS members or just other folks I know with Sounders season tickets, who chose not to go to that last home match. But
I wasn't there because I was
you were getting your dance on.
Daddy-daughter dance on. Although I say that facility was then closed 2 days later for coronavirus fears. So
cool.
That's nice.
That's awesome. I'm sure that was helpful for you a few days later. Yeah.
Yes, it was.
So again, we can dive around a little bit because there's some other stuff, and we've got roughly half an hour left till we typically hop off. U.S. Soccer has some new leadership. So
yes,
what can you tell us?
They do. Yeah. So Cindy Cohen, I think we talked about her last week a little bit. And so, for those who don't know, the CEO of U.S. Soccer had been vacant since September, when Dan Flynn down. Flynn's been there for like 20 plus years, is steeped in U.S. soccer, knows all the skeletons, knows where all the bodies are buried, knows very experienced guy. I should say that as well. But so he stepped down about in September, and then everyone, I think, in our audience probably recalls like Jay Berhalter, the brother of Greg Berhalter, who's the head of the men's national team. Review Glassdoor was site where apply for jobs, get job reviews for employers, that kind of thing. And he was basically taken reviews were so negative towards him. So former agents work for uh, before their their rights.
For sure. I mean, Don Garber only sent out like 600 or 800 tweets talking about how awesome of a person this was, and he's known him for so long, and blah 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 blah. So yeah, I'll be really interested to see how this goes, because it's funny, we had this point of like, oh, MLS maybe will veer off a little bit from some, and now it's like, I don't know if that's going to happen. It's just very interesting, more than anything. So I think the other thing that came out after we had the show was, because we had live stuff yet again in the middle of the show last time around. It was really interesting to see again reactions in the following days. People were just like, really? That's where you're going right now with this? Like, cool, you just deleted a bunch of stuff. It doesn't mean you didn't say it already, a week ago.
Yes.
It's just pretty random. All right, so we can move on from U.S. soccer, because other than the women's national team being awesome, I don't know if there's really anything we need to get into.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say is the summary judgment motion between U.S. soccer and the women's national team is set to be heard a week from today. So next week will certainly be interesting to find out what happens there, because if either side wins their motion, that's going to be a bombshell. Because if the women win their motion, that essentially means the case is over and they're going to get a lot of money in damages. And if the federation wins, that means that the women lose their suit, most likely, and they get no additional money, and that's going to raise a firestorm for equal pay advocates. So U.S. soccer may lose by winning, and frankly, they're kind of in a lose-lose situation at this point.
Can the women's team just play for the men's team when soccer gets back, and just, like, I don't know, at least is entertaining and gets Michael Bradley off the field? We don't have to put up with that guy.
Yeah.
No, it is going to be interesting to see where all of this goes, because I think, again, there's lawsuits and then there's public opinion, and right now
They do not
the court of public
They
opinion is very much not on the side of the powers that be.
Yeah.
And that is not always the case in other situations. No. So very interesting. But I think, something I've been talking to a couple of folks at Sounders in the front office, and someone said something to me on Thursday or Friday last week. They had just said, like, the world's going to be different when we're all kind of back in action here, and like, I wonder what's going to happen, or what's going to come of it. So it was just an interesting conversation to have, and like, when we think about stuff like this particular topic, it's not necessarily something I'm really thinking about, is like, what's going to change or what's going to be different. Once teams are back in action, that's probably something where it's blatant speculation to even think about it at this point.
Yeah. I talked to Jeff about that, and we were kind of speculating like you. We have no specific information about when the drop dead date is for them to have a season that is not viable, because everything we've said everything they've said, they want to get the full season in place, and that is their overriding goal. USL, they have already said to U.S. Soccer that they're not going to participate in the U.S. Open Cup. And I asked them about that, and they basically said that this season is a priority over the U.S. Open Cup. And you have to figure that MLS is the same way, and they're not going to play in the Open Cup if if that gets in the way of them completing a substantial portion of their season. And CONCACAF Champions League, that's probably gone at this point. I don't see how that comes back unless they move it to next
And do you think
January
if
or
that
something like that,
happens,
or after.
do you think that all of the confederations or federations would do that same thing? Like, do you think they'd ever just walk away from it and be like, no Club World Cup, sorry?
Yeah, I'm fairly confident that the Club World Cup is going away this year.
Like just in general, or because of this?
Yeah,
Okay.
they're not going to have it they're not going to have it in December. And the Euros have been moved. The Champions League, I think that's still going to occur because that doesn't start until July with like the preliminary qualifiers. And I think they already gave the European nations or leagues notice that they need to have their teams in for who's going to play in those games, in those tournaments. So I think that's certainly going to happen. Unless the pandemic, which is entirely possible, becomes over the top disaster where you've got thousands of people dying per day or something like that. But short of that, UEFA is probably one of the most powerful organizations in the world, just under FIFA, especially in the sporting world. So they're going to play that tournament if they can do it at all. As far as the CONCACAF Champions League, no one cares about that relative to those tournaments. So that's just going to go away. So the U.S. Open Cup is really the one that is set to suffer the most, which is that tournament is the longest running tournament in the United States. I think it's 100 years or so, give or take. It played through the World Wars. I can say this for sure because I talked with U.S. Soccer last week. It is unlikely that the Open Cup is going to happen this year. They are preparing. I can say that with a fair degree of certainty.
That, like, if the USL sides are not going to play, it becomes a completely different discussion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's so the USL has 33, 34 teams of the 100 and some odd that are playing, and there's likely other teams that are set to drop out as well. And then MLS is going to have to make a decision here soon as well. And obviously MLS has 26 teams, so that's 50 teams right there. Is that right? Or 60 teams? Yeah, 60 teams.
So
yeah, okay. So a couple less than 26. But you add MLS and USL. If those two don't play, that's 60 teams essentially.
Yeah.
We're rounding up a little bit, but so I asked them about that. So have you explored other options? And what they've told me is that they have thought about potentially having an amateur only tournament, but that is just financially and logistically not feasible because those teams have trouble making ends meet to play in the U.S. Open Cup as it is. And sure, I suppose there would be some money freed up to try to help those teams out, get to where they need to go. But who's going to want to watch that tournament? Nobody. Those teams have, sometimes in the dozens of fans, and I don't say that to make fun of them. That's just a fact of life. That those games are not of any interest to anybody in any appreciable numbers. So you would have, I don't know, 45, 40 teams of amateurs, and maybe you get like NISA in there to play as well. It's just not a tournament anybody's going to watch. And it's, again, going to be financially prohibitive for those teams to do that because, again, you're kind of eliminating some of the close teams to play each other because, again, if you're not having USL or MLS teams in, there's not enough teams in particular areas to kind of do the regional thing that they like to do. So then you're getting into some major travel costs for amateur teams who make no money. And then at that point, again, you get back to the fact that you don't have any interest without the professional teams. So it is highly unlikely that tournament happens this year. Highly unlikely. And, again, if MLS decides to stick it out, maybe they work something out. But we know how many MLS front offices feel about the Open Cup and the priority, and especially when you talk about them trying to get as many regular season games in as possible, because that's where they're going to make the money for the season. And we know how dependent MLS is on on game day revenue. So if it's a choice between playing in a U.S. Open Cup game and cutting a regular season game, or playing in the regular game and playing U.S. Open Cup, you know which way
And you would say,
MLS.
based on your take now, or like the information you have, it's like, given where we think MLS is going to be at the best case scenario, they're already at the point of making this decision. Oh, wow. Okay.
I think it's 90. Yeah, during the summer and fall and winter. There's just, where would you reschedule it to? So
Right.
it's going to suck
already playing
because,
on
again,
Wednesdays and Thursdays at this point. So
yes, because by May 10th, how many games will MLS teams have lost?
a lot.
I want to say like eight to
It's
10.
probably 8. Yeah, off the top of my head. And I know there were a couple of breaks and whatnot, but it's probably 8. So
yeah, so those are games that are going to be now played on Wednesdays and Thursdays and Tuesdays, I guess, over the course of summer. Now they will have, without any Euros or Copa or Olympics now, and although I don't know if the MLS teams took really account of the Olympics, but without those 3 things over the summer, there are now open dates, but you can't be playing 3 games in a week for 6 weeks, 8 weeks.
No.
It's just not.
And even though,
can't do
because
that.
the Olympics is still like the youth player, it's still under whatever.
Yeah,
right?
still youth. So it's not going to be a whole lot of players impacted by. Excuse me,
But
impacted by that.
teams definitely had a ton of junior players going. I know with that the Philly match that we had talked about a week or so ago versus LAFC, they had at least 1, maybe 2 players that were like the next day going to go fly.
Yeah, yes. Dallas had quite a few as well.
It's going to be really interesting. So Eric just asked in the chat, will MLS be releasing players for international play? At this point, like, I don't even know what international play is.
Yes. Again, there are no international tournaments or fixture dates. The March one was canceled, obviously. That was the only one that was coming up. And then this summer.
Well, I guess there's Nations League, right?
All the tournaments were canceled.
European players might end up in Nations League at some point, which doesn't it run over an extended period of time, though?
No, because the Nations League fed into the Euros.
Matter. So,
yeah. So the Euros were the only thing that was going to cause MLS to need to release players. So Euros and Copas were the only 2 things that's June and maybe the first week of July, and neither of those are happening.
Well, then the answer is don't have to.
Yeah, so that's not a problem. So again, you have June for those teams. I know the Sounders took a couple of June dates off to accommodate that schedule. So there are 3 or 4 dates. You could probably get 3 or 4 games in during that time. And now, again, if I'm right and U.S. Open Cup is canceled, that is those are another set of dates that they can play. So they could probably get 3 or 4 games in June for teams that had taken international time off. But again, that you still need 5 more dates at this point.
Again, the season disappearing or being cut in half or whatever. Is this potentially like the first season in a really long time since MLS has had solid international players that teams are not just decimated, not even just good teams, like all the teams have a player here and there that's plays for Costa Rica or whatever, that all of a sudden you lost your star center back, and you lose 4 games in the middle of the year. This is the first season in a while that if I was just to go, so we don't lose anybody till who knows when, that changes. But that changes the entire dynamic of the league, because as teams build their schedules out, and again, they all get to veto a certain number of games and move them around, negotiate some things. They collaboratively do the schedule. Again, they don't get everything they want, but they have so many that they're like, nope, we're going to move that or whatever that they agree to with their opponents. This is probably the first time in a long time that that isn't going to be a concern for most teams.
Nope. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, everyone should be at full strength when they come back, assuming we are back before September, which is the next international date, which is available. So, yeah, if they're back in, again, I don't think there's any chance they're back on May 10th. So we'll say June 10th is when they're back, because that's at least in the realm of possibility. So yeah, every team would have their full allotment of players until September, and so that would allow them to get a bunch of games in. Of course, in September, qualifying for 2022 World Cup starts, and so you're almost assuredly going to start losing players, and you're also assuredly going to be playing through those international dates if you're MLS, because you can't squeeze everything in June. You still have now five or six game dates, and up to 10 or 12 if you're not back till June, because the Sounders had a packed May. I think they had like 6 games in that month. So, and then they've lost half of March, most of April. All of April. Yeah, all of April is gone. Yeah, all of April is gone, and if I'm right, all of May. So there's probably 14 games that they're gonna have to fill in. Again, they're gonna extend to December under pretty much any scenario.
Do you think, and again, this is speculation from the FAA, that EPL would start as of a particular date, but they're talking about, like, for sure, we're going to start play as long as it's safe for our players and do closed doors. Do you think that's a possibility in MLS?
No. I won't say no chance. I'll say very little chance.
Where you were like, it's about revenue and it's challenging for teams to do it.
It's about, they would be losing money on travel, because even if the CBA was modified to let them take commercial flights, which are substantially cheaper than charters, and they are substantially cheaper than charters. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in difference in charter legs. So even accounting for that, you would be losing money going to closed door games. And that's to say nothing of the fact that TV partners would likely not want to have anything to do with that, just from an atmosphere perspective. I mean, if for some reason baseball cancels their season and there's nothing going on in the summer, then sure, maybe television networks will be like, well, we're desperate for content, and therefore, we'll abide or we'll tolerate closed door matches. MLS is simply not in a position where they can afford to do that, because, again, if you're doing closed door matches for 2/3 of the season, then you start to ask questions about whether they're refunding season ticket holders money, and you got to figure that at some point they're doing that towards next year. Either way, they are losing money at that point. And we haven't really talked about it. Handling 12-month payment plan.
I think and it's actually on my list of things to ask them about, because that's still going on, obviously. I think final payments were either this month or last month, for the the 6 month or whatever, that kind of pay as you go kind of core. Yeah. But yeah, that's a thing that I've read different things from different teams. So it seems like there isn't necessarily one hard and fast rule, but not everybody does the same type of ticketing payment.
Exactly.
So we have a little bit of errata we can throw around in the last few minutes of chatting. May 10th is the current, if we guessed a random date, do you think that the Sounders would have a streaming partner by May 10th?
So they should have. How long has it been since that was before the Columbus game? That was the first one they did not have a streaming partner for, because the first game of the season was a national TV game, so it didn't matter. So what date was that game on? I'm forgetting. Was it on the 7th?
It was 2 weeks ago, 7th? Saturday. Yes.
Okay. So yeah, so we'll say around the 7th. I know my date might be a little
so
off.
roughly
So
2 months.
yes, they will have. Well, again, who knows what's happening with this? How the pandemic is impacting things. But I was I was told that we should expect the announcement within about a month of the Columbus game. There is a possibility that about 4 to 5 total games would not be available in Eastern Washington while they finished up the deal.
Okay.
Potentially that they could have. It's possible they would have been ready to announce it last week or something like that. But again, this has clearly changed how those negotiations have gone, and who knows how that's impacted things. But there was a possibility that there would have been a month or so of no Eastern Washington or outside market availability for Sounders games. And so at this point, I'm sure they're just holding it until they know when they're going to be back, because there's no point at this point to make that announcement because there are no games to broadcast.
I mean, that company could just show up
Except
now
for,
and be the hero.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Again, Amazon deal. That is. You're requesting a service from the bartender.
I mean, I could request service. He can't.
Oh, are you requesting entry? Hello.
He could talk into the micro. You could probably talk, and they could probably hear you. Hello. I don't know if you need to like.
Oh, I can hear you. It's fine.
Yeah. It's Larry.
Hi,
Larry.
This is everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Step into the camera a little bit. There you go.
Hi, all 5 of you.
We'll get the spam out of the shot, and we'll pull you in a little bit there. How's it going?
Great.
You're
how
much
are
more
you?
handsome than Spam, Larry.
This is not social distancing, but
Yes.
we are quarantined together. So
we live together. So
Yeah, is that the rule?
technically, you're supposed to be 6 feet away from people at all times. But if you've
At all times,
you've watched
or
any government press conference
this is like
in
it.
any state
Yeah.
or any country, that's literally never happened.
Well, I saw a
Hey,
report
everybody.
that someone suggested, and that doesn't apply for you two direct.
Cool. Yeah,
Or
I'm not taking any suggestions from elected officials basically ever again at this point. I've given up. Larry has been dominating the underworld
just very
in video games for the last
procreation,
number of hours, I believe.
et cetera.
So I
It's not
think he's
possible
now
to
getting ready to go to sleep
official.
because he has to get up at
I am.
God knows what time. That's 0 dark 30 is going to happen really soon.
Super early.
Yeah.
This has been nice.
Nice.
It's great because Mickey was sitting here talking, and I just was watching his lip move, going.
We yeah, you can't hear him. It's
I
not as
can't
fun.
hear 'cause-
So
Yeah.
I'm just attempting to like bridge this discussion. Do you want to? Did you watch Raul Ruidiaz on the internet yesterday? Did you do any of that?
I've watched them on and off here and there. I don't remember what happened yesterday.
There was
So
some
the
fun
spoons-
happening.
Was the spoons yesterday?
I feel like that was yesterday.
I saw that.
Yeah. So
That's fun.
needless to say, and Hope, I know you were waiting for this. I think there may have been other comments. Mickey, did you spend any time on the Raul Ruidiaz Instagram et al. Over the last 48 hours?
No, I've heard about it. I've not gotten involved. I will say that after we're done here. So give me the
It's
quick and dirty.
basically that. What was the comment that happened? Up, I'd have to scroll up. I think it was concerned. Oh, here you go. You've got Hope's comments.
Nice.
Got kicked out of the kitchen and went. And let's just say they were having a really good time. Hilarity ensued, and as it usually does. And it was basically just internet good times. And you really just have to hope that the guy has enough recovery time, because at some point, like, he's gonna fall over something. It's like any sitcom you've ever watched, like someone breaks an arm,
Hijinks
in the middle
ensue.
of hijinks ensuing. Yeah. And that cannot happen to a Raul.
Cannot.
So Raul's apparently also on TikTok. So No one here knows anything about TikTok or spends any time on there at
I'm
all.
holding out on it.
You are the only one. Let me
Yes,
just say.
that's my goal. I do not want to
I just
succumb.
have to say, like being quarantined is going to get me so much internet karma via Larry and Emily's dog. It's not even funny. So I've already I just did like one really simple photo thing, but I've already got a couple of other ideas because I have definitely spent countless hours watching things. I actually was banned from liking other people's videos because I had watched and commented on too many or liked too many within a period of time. Yeah.
I did not know that was possible.
Neither did I. I had no idea. I Googled it, and then they were like, what did you do? Like Google actually reached out of my computer and was like, what are you doing? No, I definitely woke up just in the middle of the night. I am not going to let Rigby drop. That's not happening. We're getting comments about why Nuhu has a broken hand or is in a cast. Is this information? I do not have this information.
I don't have this information, and again, I
TikTok
will
video.
assume that it'll be healed by the time they're going to be back, which is like 8 weeks from now. So you got to.
He'll be fine.
I'm sure it'll be fine by then.
Nice. All right, so it's almost 9:00. What are other things we should talk about before we go? I didn't see any other random comments here. You saw this, Rigby's internet gold. That's accurate. What do you have, Larry? Anything before you go to bed?
Make sure you watch Raul Ruidiaz's Instagram often because he plays fire all the time. Such good music.
He does play good music. That's a good call. I'm with you.
So if you ever need a song to listen to Raul's Instagram.
Eileen's pointing out that maybe he did the toilet paper challenge horribly wrong.
I don't know if you guys seen it, but I follow some English soccer players, and one of them, their friend who is not a soccer player, was doing the toilet paper challenge, but they got a piece of tape, like clear tape, and just taped it to the tape and was just kicking it with their foot like that. It was great.
Wow.
It was
what
awesome.
Is it, the stay-at-home challenge? Is that what it's called? Something like that.
Stay-at-home challenge.
I have to tell you, I was really annoyed when I was recognizing that all these people, even like, rookies on FC Dallas, had a whole bunch of toilet paper in their house to like do this, and I had none.
Yeah.
I was like, seriously, world? Like, what's happening right now? Rigby, by the way, has just entered the room. He's now just staring at us. He probably wants my Guinness. I think that's likely. By the way, that's a good call on the Alex Morgan and Servando Carrasco.
Oh, Servando Carrasco one. Yeah, that was pretty good.
Because the write-up about it was Alex Morgan and her husband do the stay-at-home challenge was like what the tweet was. I was like, that's perfect. Like, well done, people. Stick to it. We definitely want to do a show next week. We actually had a guest lined up for today.
So close.
We're going to try and get that to work next week. Technology, hopefully working for us. So we will, fingers crossed on that.
She said that she would she's available to do it. It's just that she didn't have the technology with her computer, but she is going to go in and try to get that rectified at her work. Actually, we can say who it was. Michelle Lockup was going to join the show, Q13 reporter. And so hopefully we'll be able to get her on next week.
That will be awesome. So that would have been super fun this week, especially having just had the first kind of classics match over the weekend. We'll obviously have another one this week. So we'll test out some technology over the rest of this week and into the weekend if Rigby doesn't kill us all. And I think that's that. So send along any comments, thoughts, questions, hate mail, Rigby requests. And one way or the other, we'll produce something to have a show for y'all next week. Mickey, any final comments before we sign off?
No. Everyone stay at home unless you need to go out for essentials, and even then stay 6 feet apart. You
can get
stay safe.
Delivery.
That's all I can say.
There's Drizzly and 7-Eleven and other people. So if that's like your reason for driving around and going to the store, you can find a better way to do it. So stay safe, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Bye, Larry.
Bye. Good night.
Bye,
Good luck.
Mickey.